this ain't parents out to lunch. No, this is parenting with the punch. Oh, this ain't parents out to lunch. No, this is parenting with the punch. Class is in session, please be seated. Behaviors that get attention get repeated. Avoid the power struggle cause it will get you heated. Listen to Amanda cause she knows how to teach it. Yo, this ain't parents out to lunch. No, this is parenting with the punch. Oh, this ain't parents out to lunch. No, this is parenting with the punch. Yeah, yeah,
Hello and welcome to Parenting with a Punch show. I am your host. I'm founder of Parenting with a Punch. Visit my website, parentingwithapunch.com. Your parenting strategist and designer nanny. Special offer right now. Check it out. We have a very special guest today. From New York, Sean Grover, licensed social worker, psychotherapist, speaker, and author with over 25 years experience working with adults and children. He maintains one of the largest group therapy practices in the U.S. and leads over 300 groups a year in his practice. He's been featured in The Economist, Wall Street Journal, Newsweek, New York Magazine, the New York Times, and he's also an author of When Kids Call the Shots, How to Seize Control from Your Darling Bully and Enjoy Being a Parent Again. Please give Sean Grover a warm welcome. Hello, Sean.
Hi, Amanda. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm a big fan of yours. You know, I just discovered you had a parenting sex series.
I did. Yes.
Who does that? I think I've done this a long time. And I was looking through your site and I thought, oh my goodness, a parenting sex series. That is really exciting.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, one of the common themes that I see in working, with the families when, so intimately in the home is, I hear a lot, with the parents not communicating, right? They're not on the same page. A lot of times it's, they're not vibing as a couple and, sex plays a huge role, right? So I decided, it's time that we start talking about it and brought on a bunch of different specialists. And yeah, I had a whole sex series and it was a huge hit. It's definitely probably one of the most viewed podcasts to date.
Well, it's not talked about enough. And when I saw it there, it just sort of jumped off the page. I mean, I'm giving you a psychic pound right now to go ahead and do more of that. Because, and I know people bring their kids to our offices and their marriage or their relationship is in such a state of neglect, you can't even begin to help the child. So you get them on their feet. So
absolutely. Yep. This is
so
true.
Glad you're doing that.
Thank you. I mean, it's definitely something that, I can't work like directly with, but when I'm able to get the parents to be on the same page and when the children are, emulating the behaviors and they're experiencing anxiety and sort of just like working together as a team, hopefully that will bring some of that connectedness back. And then of course I always recommend, reaching outside for, other support, whether it not be a marriage therapist or counseling or whatever that looks like for the family. Right. So,
well, I think that, this parenting with a punch, you really do hit the things right on the head. A lot of counselors or therapists are very vague and good listeners, but they don't really give direction well. And one thing I've noticed about the way you work is you really let people know exactly what they need to do. And I think that's a great relief for a lot of parents.
Thank you. Yes, I agree. I think being straightforward, there's really no time for sugarcoating when it comes to parenting, which I'm sure you can very much agree.
Oh, yeah.
So I'd love to. So you just recently wrote an article in Psychology Today where you're featured regularly, correct? You have like over 2 million hits, I think it is.
Yes, 2 million reads, and I put 2 or 3 articles up a month. It's a lot of fun. I like writing for them.
That's awesome. Very cool. So one of the recent ones that you did was the top ten do nots, I guess, in parenting.
Yes, the blunders, screw ups, slip up, lapses, everything that parents do. We all do. I mean, no one's really an expert at this. It's a learn as you go occupation. Mm-hmm. So I thought it would be fun to do the greatest hits of parenting screw ups, which of course I have done all of them multiple times, which I think in a funny way makes me an expert on screwing up. But the article is a lot of fun and I'm getting a lot of people, contacting me, and we're having some interesting conversations. It's just great that parenting is finally getting the attention it deserves, and we're taking it seriously. I think for too long, parenting was just like something you checked off on your list. But now we're really recognizing that, my goodness, creating a new life, bringing new life into this world and how we raise them, I think that deserves attention.
I seriously could not agree. When we were growing up, and especially so I grew up in the 80s. I was born in 81, and
81?
Yes,
oh my
81.
God.
I'm 36.
Oh Lord.
But it's breaking old school cycles of parenting, and I just the way I was parented, and I'm sure the way my parents were parented, it just the shit that went on just doesn't fly anymore. And it's just there's more and more research as far as like the social emotional development and emotional intelligence, and just the psyche and how children hold on to things. And it just, like the smallest thing can be traumatic for a child.
That's right. And parenting is basically a management job, right? I mean, you're managing your own little tribe, and how you manage them really determines, how they'll emerge from that experience. When I wrote my book about bullied parents, I thought I was writing about this very isolated group that I was seeing in Manhattan of kids coming in and cursing at their parents, yelling at their parents. I mean, unbelievable behavior. And once the book was published, I didn't have a lot of, I thought, it would appeal to a certain kind of parent and a certain kind of place. Mm-hmm. But so far it's been translated into 3 different languages: Chinese, Russian, Korean. So obviously this idea of a child bullying their parent is much bigger than I had thought when I originally started out writing the book.
Yeah, I see it and those are of course like some of the older ages, right? What's the youngest child that you work with in the office? Well,
in the old days, I started out in the same range with you. I was working with preschool and elementary. Okay. And then as the years gone on and I got older, and I didn't like getting up and down off the floor.
Yes.
Playing with toys and Connect Four and Jenga, whatever. I started focusing on teenagers and young adults and college students. But that idea of the seeds for a child that misbehaves or pushes around their parents really start very, very young. So if we can catch them, I'm always thrilled when I'm invited to do a workshop at an elementary school, because I'm saying, this is the scene of the crime. This is what you're doing today is going to echo the next 10 or 15 years. So catching it early is the best way. Prevention is a lot easier than undoing bad habits.
Oh, it's so true. And you literally read my mind, because one of the things that I wanted to ask you was your thoughts as far as, catching it early, especially with my focusing on the preschool years, like ages 3 to 5. I mean, I do work with a little bit older, but I'm really trying to niche down as much as I can, because I know how important those early years on. And it never seems to amaze me in hearing, the way children talk to their parents, and parents just, automatically, I think they resort to the yelling, right? Or the screaming, or don't do that, stop that, or it just ends up becoming this like very unhealthy, like communication cycle.
Yes. And well, children are always testing parents. That's not changed. I mean,
Right.
Mother Nature puts parents and the children are on a collision course.
Yes.
You know, and a parent just becomes this sort of no factory. No, don't do that. No, don't do this. No, don't. And once we, you know, no one likes, even a small child doesn't want to be controlled. So
Right.
they do rebel. And actually, you want your kid to be a little defiant. You want your kid to have a voice, to push back a little. That's actually a healthy thing. But like you said, if we push back louder and use our size and dominate them, then we're going to have all sorts of behavior problems that are going to erupt down the line, because kids will get bigger and begin to mirror your behavior. So if you're bullying, they bully. If you're yelling, they're yelling. If you're using abusive language, they use abusive language. And one thing I witnessed after doing this for nearly 25 years, I get these children who come back as adults to visit me. And I remember this young man I saw when he was about 12, and he was always just awful to his mother. Just, oh my gosh, I was exhausting myself. By 12, 13, 14, 16, 17, by late teens, these habits can become so ingrained. It's so challenging to undo them. So I did the best I could. And years later, he came back to me, married, with his own kid. And he came in for a consultation to talk with his wife because they're having some problems. And guess what he was doing?
What?
He was talking to his wife in the ways that he was talking to his mother. He was abusive. He was yelling. He was putting her down. So that, 15 years later, that those behaviors that were allowed to fester and take root, he takes now into all relationships, especially with women.
I am so glad that we hit that nail, because people don't comprehend the significance of like how much is ingrained and like what the behaviors are that you are emulating from a very young age and how it plays a role into your adult relationships. It never seems to amaze me. It honestly does not.
Well, this is the first relationship in the world.
Right.
Is your parents, or your relationship to your parent.
Right.
So that's ground zero. That's where we begin to really foster these habits, and if they're going to be healthy or not healthy, that's really up to the parent. Parents are always complaining to me about maybe siblings fighting, or they don't get along, and they say, "Well, this is just the way it is," and I'll say, "Actually, no. Siblings that don't get along, that's a parenting fail." And I'll go through a list of parenting fails, but it seems to be our nature to want to see something as separate from us, as something ingrained. I had nothing to do with that.
Right.
Doing the best they can. But really looking at our own behaviors, our own forms of communicating, how we relate to our partner. These are the things that the child are going to absorb much more than what we tell them to do.
Right. Yeah. It's all about the modeling, right? And the communication, where it really stems from like the relationship, the parent relationship, right?
Absolutely. And if you remember when you were a kid, when you went over a friend's house, how different the experience may have been from yours, because every family, whether they are conscious of it or not, is creating a culture within their household. Do they eat dinner together? Are they affectionate with each other? Or do they yell at each other? I remember I was in college. I was dating a girl, and I guess I should say woman. And I went over her house, and they were lovely people, but for some reason they were free to curse at each other. I mean, curse. Oh, I don't think I'm conservative or uptight, but screaming at your mother, dropping the F-bomb, but this was the culture of her family.
Yeah. It's I can relate all too well. It really, I hear it from my mother. Will ask me all the time, but they see, I think my parents still kind of have a little less understanding of, or really like the magnitude of the work that I'm doing in the home with families. And my mother will ask me quite frequently, like, oh, did we screw up? Like, what did we do wrong? And I honestly just redirect it. I'm just like, you know what? Like, I can't, Mom, that you did your best. You do what you had to do. And to sit there and like tell her everything that she did wrong in terms of, the things that children really emulate from their parents is just, I can't reiterate it anymore. And that's why I think it's so important to nip it in the bud so early, because as we know, right, the divorce rate is like 50%, and even less than that are actually happy of the rest that are even still married.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the stats are really shocking on that stuff right now.
And, as far as just, again, the communication piece, which then comes right back to the whole sex piece as well in the relationships. If they don't have that healthy communication with each other, they're going to end up emulating it for their children. And then it just ends up being basically a complete shit show at home. Like I had a parent just recently say to me that, she really can't enjoy her child because her child is constantly throwing tantrums and testing the boundaries. And she had even admitted that she's going off of like her own parenting, her own parenting styles from how she was raised. And they're like stuck in this negative cycle.
That's right. And it's really hard. It's amazing to me. So I can't think of anyone I know who goes into the home to meet with parents. But, the early child therapists all did that. I remember reading an article with Erik Erikson, who was one of the pioneers in that, in this particular, working with families and children. Mm-hmm. And they asked him, what is the first thing you do when you're assessing a child? And he said, well, I always like to have dinner in their home with them.
Yes.
Who does that? Nowadays, no one leaves their office. So you're doing that is really, to me, like a renaissance of early child development and child work. It's the express lane. If you really want to see a family, you see them many times. That's when parents present what they present in your office or in my office isn't so accurate. Right. But you can hide at home. They're going to slip into those habits right in front of you. So hats off to you, Amanda, for doing that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. It's when I first started doing it, cause I worked, I'm sure, what it's a See It special education itinerant teacher in New York. Mm. Have you heard of the title? Have you heard of the title Special Education Itinerant Teacher in the preschool years, ages 3 to 5, that get through the state?
No, but it sounds familiar, but I don't know what they call that in New York. That's the name of it in New York?
Yeah, that's in New York. Yeah, so that was the work that I was doing in New York, and that's sort of how I started that in about 2009, and that's sort of how. So some of the families that I worked with pushing into the private preschools would hire me to work with them at the home as well, because of course, if their children are having behaviors in the preschool environment, then most likely they're going to be struggling at home. And that's kind of how I started working in the homes, and just, and I would do those morning and like PM routines. I'd have dinner with the families. I'd be there for the bedtime, and then also would come like in the morning routines as well. And that's really when you see, those are a lot, the transition times are a lot of when you see the struggles.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that isn't spoken about enough is that in terms of these divorce rates, I really feel that parenting often destroys relationships because they don't know what they're getting themselves into. Their partner may have a completely different style. It puts them under enormous stress. So parenting is really, I remember reading statistics where after the first child, within the first year or two, 40% of couples report they're unhappy in their relationship. And more women are filing today for divorce than men. So if you can work together as parents, your relationship's going to be much healthier. But trying to work on your relationship and without working on your parenting, it's just not going to happen.
Right.
And I think that a lot of people go their separate ways over parenting issues.
Yeah, because it just ends up being something that they kind of like can't sweep under the rug, right? And then everything else sort of like falls to the wayside, and then they get to this point where like, okay, well, where do we go?
That's right. And usually you have, usually one of the most dominant patterns I see is there's one parent that is sort of the taskmaster who does all the unattractive parenting things like homework and room cleaning and everything. And then the other parent is sort of the fun parent. They're the ones that hang out with the kid and do things. It's so unfair and so unbalanced. And you can think as a child internalizes those two models, depending on the gender of the parent, that's how they begin to associate those genders. So absolutely, those early patterns endure.
Yes. Now, what are your thoughts on in the early? I mean, I know we touched upon it already, kind of, but in terms of in the younger years and children, because I have a lot of families that reach out to me that have sort of exhausted the talk therapy in an office, and it didn't work as far as like getting that support in the home or like in the in the environments where you're going to see the real deal. Do you think like in the early years, like and I'm talking like toddler, like even 4 to like 6 years old, do you feel that sitting in an office can be helpful in terms of like getting the support that they need if they're, displaying behaviors or anxiety?
Well, more and more, I'm seeing parents without their children.
Right.
In the early stages.
Yeah.
Because if I can get them to behave differently or to interact more therapeutically,
right,
I found that to be much more effective than what I call dry cleaning therapy, where parent drops off the kid, here, straighten them out, I'll come back in an hour.
Yep.
You don't see a lot of gains in the rewards in our work. For me, is always seeing people grow and experience the benefits of self-knowledge and the work of therapy. So recently, more and more, I'm getting couples coming in, and they're talking about their kids, these sort of monster children. But I said to a couple the other day, can you commit to non-reactivity? So if your kid is having a meltdown, can you commit that you're not going to go to their level and start yelling and screaming? Because when you do, you reinforce. You're just having a bigger temper tantrum because you're a bigger person.
Exactly.
When I said that to them, they looked so stunned and almost offended that I was suggesting that they were encouraging that behavior. So it's a beginning of a dialogue. And also when the parents come in, I notice how they relate to each other. A few years ago, I had a couple come in, and I just sensed there was so much tension in their marriage. Within 3 minutes, I had a headache. I had a literal headache just sitting with them. So I was wondering how this must affect the child. So I said, I get the sense there's an imbalance here, that one of you is working harder than the other. And the explosion in the room, and the father started, the mother accused him of doing that, and he stormed out of my office and slammed the door. He came back a while later and calmed down, but that I was trying to get right at the core of the issue, which their marriage has become so toxic, it's impossible for me to help their children without helping them first.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I agree.
So it's helpful in the office. Yeah, sure. I've done play therapy for over 10 years. I was in schools setting up prevention programs, and play therapy is great in terms of helping kids develop a voice and a sense of self. But if you're sending a soldier back to the front line, how successful are you going to be with his PTSD if he keeps going back? And the family is the front line. So no matter how much the child loves talking to me in therapy, or we have so much fun, if I'm sending them back to a household that's all full of all this tension and toxicity, it's going to be very hard to see a lot of gains, or gains that are sustainable.
Yep. Agreed. And I think it takes a lot. I mean, I'm working with one family right now where, mom is a little bit more conscious and more present in the moment, and dad is more stuck in like his way of, how he was raised in terms of just being more like, the militant and sort of like, taking things away or like threatening, like, well, if you don't behave, we just bought you Legos, I'm going to bring them back. And it's just, luckily they both, want to work together, and he wants to be able to put in the work. But the reality of it is too, is like, it takes time, and it takes patience, and it's not something that happens overnight. But I think a lot of parents, it gets very difficult to even have that conversation in the first place, because it's now a requirement in terms of like reaching out to me and getting support. If you haven't had a conversation with your husband, don't waste my time, because you guys need to be on the same page in terms of wanting to get that support.
There you go. You're parenting with a punch again, Amanda. You're getting right to the point. I had this thing about divorce. I wrote an article for Psychology Today about why bad marriages are worse for kids than divorce. And the idea came from this 12-year-old who didn't, of course, what 12-year-old wants to be in therapy?
Right.
Didn't want to be in therapy. They're all hostages. So she said to me, after we chatted for a little bit, she said, I'll agree to be in therapy with you if you just one condition. And I thought, oh, okay, what is it? And she said, you promise me you'll do everything you can to get my parents to get divorced. And I had never heard it. I said, you want me to encourage your parents to get divorced? Yes, absolutely. Well, when I sat down with their parents, and this was a very, very unhealthy marriage, one of the worst I've ever seen, I began to think, oh my gosh, she's right. There was so much that I couldn't repair. And ultimately, I always worked to keep couples together. But in this case, they wound up separating. And this young girl got better so much quicker. Her anxiety levels came down. She could sleep at night. Her confidence rose a bit. Suddenly, by not being in an environment full of tension, she began to emerge in a way that was absolutely impossible. So, what you're doing, going into the home, working on these things, kids who grow up with parents at battle really fear intimacy as they get older, because intimacy is associated with vulnerability, and vulnerability only leads to hurt. So if we look at these patterns that are being programmed in, and the mood disorders and self-esteem issues and panic attacks and anxiety, I really want to take a hard look at the family and addressing those issues in my office, or if I could get into the homes like you're doing, that would be some fun right there.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm trying to, it's not going to be something that I can do forever, but traveling, I have gone to San Francisco once to work with a family for a week where I did some sessions, but even just doing those sort of like week-long intensives or weekend intensives for families that struggle and need support, because yeah, like you said, there's not many, especially in the early years, that go into the home.
Yeah, and if parents, I find them, if parents are truly committed to their children and want to do the right thing for their kids, you can get a lot of good work done.
Yep.
But if they're caught up in their own egos and they want to win or be right or have control, it's going to be a longer battle. But thank goodness when parents really come to their senses and realize how much they're hurting their children, they begin to behave much better.
And that is my goal, is to bring more light and more consciousness into our parenting. I think a lot of people don't comprehend how much work it is to be a parent, and you're going to make mistakes. Nobody's perfect, but if you are aware and you can be as proactive as you can, and you go into parenting, especially with your first child, knowing what to expect and sort of, making sure that you and your partner are on the same page, then it's going to make life so much easier. And the way I look at it, it is quality of life, right? So at the end of the day, it's really about how you choose to live your life. Do you want to live your life with more calm and ease and happiness and getting along, or do you, or would you rather, struggle and be upset and want to cry, on a daily basis and just constantly feel stressed out?
Yeah, and I think that's where parents really need tools more than anything. I mean, we can be empathic and we can understand them,
right,
and support them, but many parents today they don't have tools. They were not raised in a way where they learn to be effective parents. They're sort of scrambling, and if their parents were dictatorial or punishing, and they really suffered under their parents, they tend to become pushover parents with their kids because they don't want to recreate that situation. They end up becoming their child's friend. And then just as they were bullied by their parent, they suddenly they're in the same situation with their own child where the child is bullying them.
Right.
But in my book, I really focus on a lot of self-care and self-work before we even discuss your child. If you're not sleeping well, if you're not exercising, if you don't have a social life, if you're isolated, you are not going to be an effective parent. And no child wants an unhappy parent. At any age, adults come in and I say, what if your mother called you and said she was having the best year of her life and she never felt, what is the word they always say? Relieved. I would feel so relieved. So an unhappy parent is a burden for a child at any age.
Mm-hmm. This is true. Now, and your book's on Amazon, correct?
It's all over
probably
the place.
Everywhere. Yeah.
Amazon, Barnes and Noble. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I am in the process of writing my first book, and it's pretty much going to be it's like a handbook type thing, catered more towards the early years and really like the 4 pillars of parenting with a punch. So I'm excited to bring that to the world. And anyone that is listening, make sure you go and get Sean's book as well. Tell us the names of them again.
The book is When Kids Call the Shots, How to Seize Control from Your Darling Bully and Enjoy Parenting Again.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show today. We could probably talk for hours.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's great to know you're out there, doing this kind of work. We really need more and more of this.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I hope to collaborate in the near future and possibly, come to New York and maybe be involved in some workshops and such. That would be amazing.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. Again, it was such a pleasure to have you on, and we will definitely stay in touch and talk soon.
Okay, Amanda, take care. Keep parenting with a punch.
Thanks, Sean. Have a great day.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye. Thank you for tuning in to the show, Parenting with a Punch. Please give us a rating and or review. That's how we reach more families all over the world. Have a great day, y'all. ParentingWithAPunch.com. Don't forget, I'm offering a special this month and only this month. Get in on it.
Yo, this ain't parents out to lunch. No, this is parenting with the punch. Oh, this ain't parents out to lunch. No, this is parenting with the punch. Class is in session. Please be seated. Behaviors that get attention get repeated. Avoid the power struggle cause it will get you heated. Listen to Amanda cause she knows how to teach it. Yo, this ain't parents out to lunch. No, this is parenting with the punch. Oh, this ain't parents out to lunch. No, this is parenting with the punch. Yeah, yeah,